This is Market Day Report. We had flash sales reported by USDA earlier this morning. Again, these were made, well, we don't know when they were made. It wasn't necessarily last night or even yesterday, but 100,000, nearly 101,000 metric tons to Colombia. They're a top 5 buyer of U.S. corn. And also our number 1 buyer, Mexico, taking just over 392,000 metric tons. What's happening in the corn market right now? We're seeing higher trade. March contract 445 3/4. We're trading in that's almost a 5-cent trade range. I'll just say 5. Not quite there yet, but up 2.5 cents on the trade right now for corn. What about beans? Well, beans are up 6.5. 11.22 1/4. We're a tick off the day's high on that January contract. Let's touch on soy meal contracts. They're higher across the board. And then we have bean oil, mostly lower, and we're seeing 51s now along with the 52s. Wheat market, here's Chicago, and the March contract down 1/2 penny. New crop, July unchanged, 5.53. Hard red, new crop, 1/2 penny higher, 5.54. Spring wheat is moving lower, and the cotton market is down 14 on the March at 64.32. Ted Seifried's with Zaner Ag Hedge. All right, Ted, what's got your attention this morning?
Well, I mean, soybeans have just rallied 9 cents in the last couple of minutes, and trying to figure out what that is really just happened right now. We were down on the day. It could be technical. We are sort of bouncing off this neckline of this head and shoulders formation that had been setting up in the soybeans. So it is possible that that is what was doing it, but I'm guessing there's some news out there, and well, haven't had enough time to search through the headlines as I was getting ready to talk to you, buddy.
Well, and speaking of the headlines, again, we get the note there from Treasury Secretary Bessent that China will make their purchases by February. And I guess that caught some of us off guard until I stopped and looked up, when is the Chinese New Year? And it's February. Is there any correlation to that, you think?
I don't know. Maybe it's a lot more correlated to what our typical export window to China would be. And that would be really now through February, when Brazil is, getting their first half of harvest done and finally getting product to port. And, they're able to start shipping to China. I think there's been a lot of confusion over that since the get-go. I mean, they have said, the White House, the administration has said this calendar year, before January 1st. I think that's a lost in translation thing. I think when these numbers were agreed upon, and by the way, still not signed, right? So when these numbers were agreed upon, I think that was for this marketing year, which would basically be from now through February for our typical marketing year to China specifically. So I think there was just some clarification. I do think it really did catch a number of traders off guard, but I'm thinking more like the small speculators, people that don't really understand marketing years and things like that. I think guys that do balance sheets and really look into it probably understood that that was more likely not going to be by January 1st. It was more likely going to be by the end of February or so. So, yeah, I think the market took it poorly yesterday. Ultimately, I don't know if that really changes anything. At the end of the day, 12 million metric tons, if that's all China buys, it's not enough to get us to the the current estimate the USDA has for our full season exports. I don't know if they'll make any changes on this December report. A lot of times they like to punt to January on any big demand changes because they know that they might be making some bigger changes on the production side of things in that crop production report that we see in January. We do not see any changes in production in December. So I don't know if you'll see it on the report next week, but at the way things stand, 12 million metric tons it's just not going to be enough, Tony.
Yeah. Okay, Ted, hang on. We'll take a break. We'll come back and check in on a market that's been a bull market in the past. Is there more room? We'll find out in a moment. This is Market Day Report. So as we look at the protein sector, let's start with the hogs right now, and the hog market moving higher. February contract at 81.60. It's up 60. now 85.40 on the April contract as it trades 67 higher. How about feeders? You know, feeders earlier in the week hitting limit moves higher. We've had a lot of moves higher, limit higher, and limit lower here over the last 6 weeks. Well, we're not limit bound right now, but March feeders 207 higher, and the January up 255 at 334.40. Then we go to live cattle futures 220.02 on the December. It's $1.07 higher, and the February at 222.77 is up 87. Let's go back to Chicago. Vice President with Zaner Ag Hedge, it's Ted Seifried. Ted, what are you watching here?
You've got a cattle complex that's digested a lot of bad news or concerns about, border reopening and things like that. Now we've had a sort of vacuum of the last couple of weeks without Mexican President Steinbaum meeting with Brooke Rollins and talking about border reopening and things like that, or news on, dropping tariffs on Brazilian beef imports or things like that. We've got all that behind us, and the administration hasn't been talking about lowering beef prices in the last couple of weeks or so. And that's allowed us to really kind of go back to focus on, hey, we still have a very tight supply situation. And feeders have been the leaders to the upside. That's an old floor thing that we like to say. But, feeders have had a very nice bounce off of lows. We've gotten past, plant closures and stuff like that. You've also had a really nice rebound in the equities markets. And so when it comes to, hey, do we feel like domestic demand is going to be strong here or remain strong? There's a lot easier feelings about that as well. So it's been a very nice bounce off that corrective low. Whether that low is in or not, it really depends on what headlines come. Are we going to reopen that border? I feel like that is a goalpost that's moving a little further away after yesterday's announcement of a New World screwworm being found within like 120 miles of the border once again. Yeah, that's I think where the strength is coming from. We're getting back to the fundamentals that we had been trading rather than the fears of the fundamentals of the border reopening or a big break in domestic demand coming from a big break in the stock market and things like that.
Yeah, Ted, perfect point there and a great way to end on the New World screwworm, which, again, gets cold enough further south and can really help us out there as well. Ted Seifried's with Zaner Ag Hedge.